I used to believe betrayal arrived with warning signs, raised voices, slammed doors, the slow cracking of something fragile. But on the night everything changed, it arrived wrapped in silk, applause, and the warm glow of golden chandeliers. The ballroom at the Meridian Hotel shimmered like a palace polished just for my parents' charity gala. The floral arrangements towered higher than some of the donors' egos, and the air carried that familiar scent of power disguised as sophistication. I sat at a table near the front, trying to ignore the stiffness in my mother's smile each time she glanced my way. She had that look again, the one she wore when she was bracing for something, or hiding something. Daniel, my older brother, was the star of the evening. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo tailored so sharply it could cut glass. Everywhere he walked, people greeted him with proud handshakes and congratulatory back pats. The golden child, the heir, the public face of our family, he basked in it all, soaking up admiration the way desert sand drinks the first drop of rain. I didn't mind being invisible not until that night. The host finished introducing the night's sponsors and invited my parents on stage for what he called a special announcement. My mother practically glowed. My father looked like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. I felt a flicker of unease, a chill that didn't belong in such a warm, glittering room. My father took the microphone. "Thank you all for joining us this evening," he began, his voice strong and theatrical. "Tonight, our family wishes to honor someone whose dedication, brilliance, and leadership represent the future of our legacy. The future of our legacy." My pulse quickened. "Daniel," he continued, stretching out a hand toward my brother, "your achievements this year have made us extraordinarily proud, and so, in recognition of your contributions and the bright path ahead, we are thrilled to gift you a $15 million legacy fund to expand your work." It felt like the room gasped before the applause began. $15 million, a gift, from the family trust, the trust I co-owned. My mother wiped tears from the corners of her eyes. The guests rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed like fireworks as Daniel stepped onto the stage with a rehearsed expression of humble surprise. He pressed a hand to his chest as though this wasn't something he had known about for weeks, maybe months. I sat frozen, staring at the people cheering while my entire existence dissolved in the lights above them. My parents had always played favorites, but this was theft dressed up as celebration, a public coronation, a declaration that I was nothing more than a shadow in the family portrait. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was numb, completely, frighteningly numb, but the numbness cracked when my father added, "This is just the beginning of what we hope to build through Daniel's leadership." Daniel's leadership. Daniel's legacy, Daniel's inheritance, mine erased, something inside me. Something long silenced finally rose. I stood. My chair scraped the floor sharply, drawing attention. My mother's smile fell. Daniel's face paled. I walked toward the stage, calm but resolute, as whispers rippled through the crowd. My father attempted a nervous laugh as I approached the microphone, but I gently took it from his hand. The ballroom quieted. "You can't give," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "what you don't own." And just like that, the night shattered. When I walked out of the ballroom that night, I'd imagined the cold air outside would steady me. But the moment the heavy doors shut behind me, the world felt strangely weightless, like I had stepped out of a play I didn't audition for. My heart was still hammering, though my voice had been calm. It always surprised people how steady I could be when everything inside me was burning. I didn't make it more than 20 steps before my mother called out my name. Her HELSCLATTERING Desmcat. Faz not in the FRANTICLL, behind me. "Stop," she hissed, breathless. "What on earth were you thinking?" I turned slowly. I was thinking. I said, "That you just tried to give away half of what belongs to me." Her eyes darted around to make sure no guests were listening. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. She looked wounded by the gesture. Funny, how she only seemed hurt when she wasn't the one holding the knife. "We were going to explain everything," she whispered sharply, "when, after the gala, after the transfer, after I discovered the trust was empty." She froze, and in that moment, her eyes told me everything her mouth never dared admit. She knew. She had known for a long time. And she had counted on my silence, on my loyalty to protect Daniel. You don't understand. No, I said. You don't understand. I walked past her without waiting for a response. Behind me, her voice cracked into a quiet plea, but I didn't look back. I had done enough looking back in my life. The next morning, chaos arrived disguised as a breakfast meeting. My father summoned me to his study, the one he always called his sanctuary, as if the rest of the house existed to serve his moods. He didn't bother greeting me. Your outburst last night was humiliating, he said, pacing behind his mahogany desk. You made us look like fools. You didn't need my help with that. I replied calmly. He slammed a hand on the desk, and the picture frames rattled. You don't understand how these things work. The announcement was symbolic. A gesture, I repeated. A $15 million gesture from a trust that legally belongs to both your children. His mouth tightened. It's not that simple. Then likely of EXPLUNNECIN it. Make it simple. He couldn't, and that was the first sign of the truth he was about to lose control of. Finally, he sat down and exhaled. Daniel needs it more than you. His business ventures are failing. I finished. I know, and you tried to fix it by raiding the trust we both own. His silence confirmed it. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was strategic, planned, executed quietly. Like a surgeon performing an operation he hoped the patient wouldn't wake up from. I spent the afternoon digging, old emails, legal documents, signed forms I had never seen, notarized approvals I had supposedly given. They had forged my signature, poorly, but enough to push paperwork past people who were trained not to question families with my parents' influence. The more I learned, the harder it became to recognize the people who had raised me. Or maybe this was who they had always been, carefully edited versions of themselves, revealed only under pressure. Daniel was the easiest to track down. I found him in his penthouse, surrounded by unfinished glasses of champagne and advisors who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. He dismissed them when he saw my expression. Look, he said immediately, hands raised in surrender. I didn't know they forged anything. But you knew they were taking my share, I said. Didn't you? He swallowed, and answered with the silence of someone who had never learned to refuse a crown offered to him, no matter who it was stolen from. In that silence, everything finally made sense. My family wasn't broken. It had been breaking me, piece by piece, for years, and I was finally awake. The decision to fight wasn't cinematic or dramatic. It came quietly the next morning, while I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. For the first time in my life, I realized that silence was a luxury I could no longer afford. At least not the kind of silence my family counted on. So I called a lawyer. Her name was Marisol Reyes Sharp, steady, and uninterested in being intimidated by legacy families like mine. She listened carefully as I laid out everything: the trust, the forged forms, the gala announcement, the years of subtle erasure. By the time I finished, she looked equal parts furious and energized. You have more than enough for a full injunction, she said. And if we subpoena the records, your parents will have to answer for every transfer they attempted. The word injunction felt like a lifeline. And Daniel, I asked, she leaned back. If his accounts were funded using assets from the trust, then legally, we freeze them too. A strange emotion flickered through me, not joy, not spite, but relief. For once, the consequences wouldn't land on me. The legal storm began quietly, but it hit with surgical precision. First came the cease and desist letters. Then the emergency motion to freeze half the trust's assets. My half. The court approved it within 24 hours. Daniel's accounts, holdings, and investment lines were immediately suspended. Deals he had been negotiating collapsed overnight when partners heard whispers of irregularities. In imminent litigation, my parents were furious. My mother showed up at my doorstep, eyes swollen but jaw clenched. How could you do this? She demanded. You forced my hand. This is your family, and no, I said softly. Family doesn't steal from you and expect applause. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She left without another word. The real fallout began when a journalist, someone who had attended the gala, caught wind of the trust dispute. They reached out asking for a statement. I didn't give one. I didn't need to. Public records spoke loudly enough. Within days, articles appeared with headlines my parents could not silence. Words like mismanagement, forgery investigation, and legacy scandal floated across social platforms like toxic confetti. My father's charitable board released a statement distancing themselves. Sponsors pulled back, unwilling to tie their name to the spectacle. Invitations to events dried up. The family name, once untouchable, suddenly carried the weight of suspicion. And all I had done was tell the truth. Daniel finally came to see me. He looked different than I'd ever seen him. Smaller, quieter, stripped of the glossy confidence he wore like armor. "You really froze everything," he said, almost disbelieving I had to. He sat down heavily. "I didn't know they forged your signature, but I figured they were reallocating things. They always told me it was temporary, that you didn't care about the money." "That's what they taught you to believe," I said, "that my silence was proof I didn't matter." He closed his eyes. "I thought I earned everything they gave me." The softness in his voice startled me. "You might have," I said, "but not at the cost of stealing what was mine." He nodded, defeated, not angrily, not resentfully, just truthfully, maybe for the first time in his life. The revenge people imagine is loud fire, fury, explosions. Mine wasn't. My revenge was paperwork, court orders, evidence, truth, no screaming, no chaos, just accountability ringing louder than applause ever could. And for once, the weight they had placed on my shoulders shifted back where it belonged, not on me. On them, after the storm of lawsuits, frozen accounts, and whispers that spread like wildfire through my family's social circles, something remarkable happened. The tension in my chest eased. Not all at once, of course. Healing doesn't arrive with grand gestures or courtroom victories. It seeps in slowly, like sunlight through cracked blinds, unnoticed until it floods the room. I moved out of the house I grew up in, the one that felt more like a museum of expectations than a home. I rented a modest loft near the coast, a place where the horizon was limitless, and the only inheritance I had to honor was my own peace. I furnished it simply: white walls, warm wood floors, a few plants I remembered to water. No trophies of my family's wealth, no reminders of their favoritism. Just space to breathe, to think, to exist without anyone else's approval. Daniel reached out after a few weeks. His messages were tentative, awkward, an apology wrapped in uncertainty. I responded once, carefully, clarifying that my goal had never been vengeance for its own sake. I wanted what was mine. I said, not to ruin you. The truth hit him harder than the court orders ever could. He visited once, bringing with him a quiet sincerity I had never expected. He was still my brother, but the years of entitlement had been stripped away by circumstance. We didn't laugh or reminisce. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We simply acknowledged reality, and for the first time, I saw the boy I remembered before the goal. Then child act became a full-time role. My parents, predictably, reacted differently. They avoided me entirely. The social invitations stopped, the calls went unanswered, and the subtle manipulations that had defined my life ceased. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could stand firmly, silently, and without compromise. The gala invitations I once coveted lost their significance. Instead, I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching young adults about personal finance and self-advocacy. It was ironic in a way. The skills my family had hoarded, manipulated, and wielded against me became tools to empower others. There was no applause, no chandeliers, no audience of wealthy socialites. Just genuine smiles, curiosity, and the quiet satisfaction of helping someone realize they were capable of more than they had been told. One evening, after a long session with students learning to navigate budgets and investments, I found myself standing on the center's modest stage. No flashing cameras, no judging eyes, just a small group of people listening intently. I smiled, thinking of the night I had walked onto the Meridian stage and shattered the illusion my family had built. Sometimes, I told them softly, the strongest victories aren't loud or public. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply living your truth and letting the consequences find their own way. For the first time, applause came not because I had claimed someone else's wealth or humiliated my family, but because I had taken my voice, my dignity, and my life back. I didn't need approval from anyone else. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet cheer of students inspired to claim their own independence. The horizon outside my window glimmered with possibilities. The past, the betrayal, the public humiliation, the years of being overlooked, was still there, but it no longer weighed me down. I had reclaimed my life, not through vengeance, not through anger, but through truth, courage, and self-respect. And in that calm, radiant silence, I finally felt whole,